So please, I'd like to introduce to some and then reintroduce to a few as well who already know him. His name is Mr. Alex Goma. He's currently the MD of Grand Cyril, a UAC company, MDC of Grand Cyril Limited. Mr. Alex Goma is an experienced business leader with over 20 years experience building people, customers, brands. Started his career from P&G, British American Tobacco, Guinness, PZ Cussons, and now Grand Cyril in Africa. Prior to his current role, he has held various roles such as Managing Director of PZ Cussons SBU, Strategy and External Affairs Director, PZ Cussons, Nigeria, Sales Director, Guinness, Nigeria, Head of Trade Marketing and Distribution, BAT, Nigeria, BAT Country Manager, Senegal, Gambia, and Mauritania, District Manager, P&G, Ghana, North and West Nigeria, Customer Market Manager, P&G, Nigeria, and Fabric Care Customer Marketing Manager, P&G, Egypt. He holds a degree in biochemistry from the University of Port Harcourt, and then he has an LLB degree from the University of London International Programs. He's a fellow of the National Institute of Marketing of Nigeria. He's a member of Advisory Board of EduScope, Advisory Board of AfriScience Digital, Non-Executive Director of Literamed Publications, publishers of Latin books. He speaks in a number of public fora with a focus on leadership, personal development, business strategy, sales, and marketing strategy and execution. If you look at the profile, you see Mr. Alex Goma has ventured and passed through a number of spaces that makes him quite an authority in FCMG, quite an authority in sales, in marketing, in management, in leadership, in distribution, and all those key elements. And I've had the opportunity of interacting with him a number of times on some of these issues, and unofficially, currently, giving us a lot of advice, about to become official in giving us a lot of advice in the days to come by God's grace. I'd like you to help me and join me today as I welcome up the podium today, Mr. Alex Goma. Now, today's template will be in two parts so that I can give you an idea of what we have, what we'll have happening today. So if you check your window, you'll find somewhere where it says question and answers. That's where you log your questions. Some people log their questions in the chat. If you log your questions in the chat, we will not attend to them on time. So I'd like to advise, if you want to log your questions, put your questions in the Q&A. You'll find it in your header. There's Q&A. That's where the questions for Q&A should go to. That's where I'll be able to see it. He'll be able to see it, and we can attend to it. So today, he will speak to us and share a few of his principles and thoughts about life generally, about his career. I will take a few minutes in asking him some questions based on over 30 questions that have been sent ahead for this presentation. So people have sent questions. I actually have about 70 odd questions, but I'm streamlining them into the ones that are similar, and we're coming up with about 30 questions. I'm still going to streamline that a bit further. I'll ask him those questions, and then we'll open the floor for everyone who wants to ask. And I'm sure more than anything in the world, one of the things that we all need right now is wisdom. We need wisdom on how do we navigate after this experience. How do we navigate after COVID? How do we ensure that we're back in business? How do we ensure that our careers are still growing? How do we ensure in the face of all of the uncertainties that the world faces today, we're able to make significant things happen? So I would like you to join me today as I welcome Mr. Alex Goma. Nothing on his profile shows where he's from. I'm sure when he's introducing himself and talking about a few things, he will bring to light the things that you probably want to hear about as well. I'm going to initiate for him to have his camera on view so that I can open his camera. Please help me say you're welcome in the window, or put your hands together the way you know how, as I welcome Mr. Alex Goma.
Hi, Diolu. Thank you very much for your welcome. Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here and to be able to share with you guys based on my experience and some of the things I've seen before. Don't believe everything you've been told, because sometimes it's overhyped. I think there are a couple of key things that I have seen over time, and I think what we're going through right now is nothing different. I believe that there's nothing new under the sun. You only see different variations of things showing. So we've been through different kinds of hardship and things before, but there are certain fundamental principles that probably guide you through all times. And I think those are the things that have helped me in my career, They've helped quite a number of people that I know who have been successful. And if you look at quite a number of companies that have been successful over time, not flash in the pan success, right? There are some underlying fundamental principles that guide them. And if we apply these principles to ourselves, we find out that, okay, we will be able to get sustainable success. And that's really what has been at the heart of everything that I've done. And just for quick intro, because I'm not going to go through over everything that Diolu said. My name is Alex, currently manage Grand Cereals as CEO. This was effective from October last year. Prior to that, I was with PZ Cousins. My education was basically in the sciences, but at some point, I think in the later part of my career, I moved into to read law. And sometimes people question, why do you do that? But maybe as we go through this meeting, at least I'll share some insights. I was the first out of 9 children, right? So very large family. Father was in the military, so I grew up basically in the barracks.
Sir, can you please increase your volume a little bit?
Okay.
Some people are saying that it's not loud enough for them.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Okay.
I think it's
so. Basically, yeah. I grew up within the military setting. Of course, in that setting, you have quite a focus on discipline, and the school I went to had 2 words in the motto. It was discipline and knowledge. I also had a father who tried to make sure that I read from a very early age. So I used to buy my own newspapers by the time I was 10 years old, right? Because that was the kind of foundation I had, right? It's quite playful, right? So I was the one person that would be on the detention list every time when I was in school. So sometimes people who know me when I was in secondary school wonder, okay, how did this guy become so calm, right? Because
we lost you. No.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now, yes.
Yeah, so basically, it seems like a bit of a disconnect between who I was as a kid growing up and being very mischievous, and then finding out that there's a burden of responsibility placed upon you. I think one of the life-changing moments for me was when I lost my dad. I lost my dad in my first year in the university, and I had to start thinking about how will the 9 kids who were behind me, right, survive. So that was the first burden of responsibility. I had to stop thinking about myself and start wondering about how I was going to probably take care of my family. So I became a bit more responsible as a result of that. And then whilst in the university in the 3rd year, a group of friends of mine put me up for election as the president of the students' body for biochemistry. I didn't want to do it, but when I saw the list of contestants, I felt these 3 guys could not lead the organization. Why should we have this guy? So they said, look, if these guys can't, then why can't you do it? And so again, it also raised some thoughts within me. If I was the president, the first thing that came to me was if a junior student came to ask about questions, how was he going to do some stuff? How was he going to find out his way with some courses? What will I do? So basically, I buckled up because of that burden of responsibility. And I think that probably made the biggest impact in changing me from recognizing that, okay, you live for yourself, but actually there's a burden of responsibility when you have responsibility for others. So a couple of things helped me across my career. And I'm just going to focus on a couple of things so that it gives points for people to start. The first thing is having clarity of purpose or a vision or something that guides or leads you, right? Why is it important? Because there's a simple formula for life. It's your thinking that determines your actions, and it's your actions that determines the results that you have. If you want to change anyone or change any organization, the first thing you have to do is to change the thinking. If the thinking, right, is based on a long-term vision and purpose, that will help guide you, because at every point, your actions will be driven by that. I think understanding that burden of responsibility actually helped to clarify my thinking. So I was never short-termist. When I looked for jobs, when I had roles, I always thought about what will I become in the next 10, 15, 20 years. I looked at the examples in the organizations and wondered how I should mirror my life. Was there anybody that stood as a role model? So I think it's critical to understand that clarity of purpose, vision, or direction of where you're going. It's like going on a journey. If you don't know how long it is, you can get tired, because if you've driven for 6 hours and you don't know how much time you have left, you're probably going to get tired and you will give up. If you're clear where you're going and why, it is easy for you to deal with the challenges that you face. So your thinking is one thing that you have to focus on. Now, what I find is that there are lots of people who think that they cannot do it. Or there are lots of people who think that, okay, I need to know someone. So a simple example I give people is, if you believe you must know somebody to get a job, you're going to spend your time trying to look for who to know to help you get a job. If you think you must be the best to get a job, then you will prepare yourself to be the best. I had a group of friends who used to then brag that there was no company that will hold us back because we will not pass the aptitude test. So we spent time practicing and preparing so that, and we said, look, we don't have anybody backing us, right? So if you call me, you will not put me down on the basis of the fact that I couldn't pass the test. And so that's where the focus on building a mindset of excellence, right? So I read wide, I looked at different things, and I refused to look at the environment where I came from, because from my own environment, people either went into the army or you went into the civil service. It was very rare for you to get into the public sector. And I remember, private sector. And when I did that, everyone wondered, how are you going to survive? You're going into a territory, you didn't read marketing, you didn't read business, and yet you're going to do something that is business oriented. But my answer was that, look, if these guys have tested me and felt that I was good enough, you know what, nothing stops me from being able to compete with the best. So, and all through my career, I was always clear where I was going. So I never made myself comfortable. As a rep, my first job rather, I stayed over 42 kilometers from where I was working. I paid to go there every day. And people say, why don't you just get a house? I said, no, if I did, I would be very comfortable in that area, because it was one of the few companies there. I would have been a local champion. So rather than that, I knew I was not going to stay there for long. And I had to go through the pain of going through that daily journey, 42 kilometers to 42 kilometers back, just to get to work every day. But I was searching for other things. Even when I was a regional manager, other regional managers had big houses, flats. I only had a one-room apartment. And again, the question was why. I said, no, you don't end up in Kano, right? The best companies and the biggest positions are in Lagos. So if you're heading to the head office, then you don't have to make yourself comfortable in one location. So I've always taken some of the tough choices. I took a pay cut to join P&G. Again, it didn't make sense to a lot of people because I took a 15, 20% pay cut with it in perks. I had company accommodation at that time. But my question was, where will I be in 20, 30 years time? And I felt that by doing that, I probably gave myself the best opportunity. For me to rationalize, I simply assumed at my age at that time, I think I was 24, I said, look, there are your mates who are in the university. Just assume you are in final year. If it goes bad, you know what, you can always find your way back again after 1 year. So I've never been afraid to take risks. I've never been afraid to do that. But they've always been based on the fact that I knew what I was doing. I had read a lot, so I knew what P&G was. So I wasn't going blind, even though they were new in Nigeria and nobody knew what they were about. A couple of key principles that I picked up along the way to sort of help. The first thing is around persistence, right? In one of the words of Calvin Coolidge, a former US president, it says nothing can take the place of persistence. You know, it's persistent people that have changed and solved the problems of the world. The world is full of people who are educated, but who are derelicts. The world is full of people who are geniuses who have failed, right? If you don't give up on the things that you plan to do, it's just a matter of time before it happens. Different careers, different businesses all have different gestation periods, right? If you plant maize, you will harvest in 3 months. If you plant cocoa, you will harvest in 3 to 5 years. If you plant a palm tree, you get your harvest in the first 4 or 5 years, but then you will harvest for another 20 years continuous. The choices are always difficult because if you plant a palm tree, the question is how do you feed for the first 4 years before you start getting something and until you get to full maturity. So it's understanding that helps guide you. The second quote that has always helped me is something from Albert Einstein. It says it's better to be a man of value than to be a man of success. You know, the way the world defines success is very relative. Is it number of cars? Is it how much money you have? Is it how many houses that you have? Any thief or criminal can lay claim to those. Value, however, it's what you do for people. And actually, money is just a store of value. So if you create value for people, you will get rewarded. The higher the value that you create, the more amount of money that you earn. So the guy who makes the most money is not the guy who digs up the road to put the fiber optic cable. It's the guy who has designed the telecoms network, right? So if you think of where superior value lies and you focus on that, you'll probably find that. So I think for me, it was clear. I always say money can be equalized. So the more value you create, the more you will have access to get money. And the last one is also from Calvin Coolidge. There's no dignity quite so impressive and no independence so important as living within your means, right? It doesn't stop you from being aspirational. It just helps you understand that this is what I can. So I'm very comfortable drinking 200 Naira Guinness by the roadside and the same way comfortable drinking a Johnny Walker Blue Label in a 5-star hotel. The thing is that I am not defined by either. It's just what I have in my pocket. If I can afford a bottle of Ogoro by the wayside, if I want to have Big High, that's what I'm going to get. If I can afford Johnny Walker, that's what I'm going to get. If you start to live within your means, it allows you to ensure that you're not pushing yourself. You're not in competition with everyone. Everyone has a race to run, his own race, right? So long as you see yourself as, or your life as that of continuous improvement towards your own purpose and destiny, then it becomes easier. So these are just guiding principles, but they just give you a view to what has guided me and what has helped. Of course, having a church background, because my mom pushed me in through the church. So I was in the boys' brigade. You learn the principles. I was in the choir. I actually wrote my first formal letter of resignation when I was 13 years old from the boys' brigade, because we went playing a football competition. The captain went to bring people who were not members of the church to participate, and I wrote a letter to the church saying why. So there are certain things, when I look back, I know that, okay, they've been consistent with me, but these are the things that have helped me. I have not believed that you need a godfather to survive. I think after I wrote an application letter to P&G, that's the last time I ever applied to any other organization. Every other role I have done in my entire career, I have been approached because somebody has either said, look, we think this guy can do this, or the organization had gotten details from other people who think this is the kind of thing that can do the job for you. So I think if you focus on building yourself, it's like one of the words in Proverbs. I'm not a preacher, so before people think I'm a pastor, but it's very simple. Have you seen a man excellent at his art? He will stand before kings. That's the principle that guides me. So I don't believe that I'm the finished product. I believe I'm work in progress. I believe that in this workshop or seminar, we'll share ideas. I'm not coming to tell people, look, this is, I am an expert because I know. No, I look at patterns. I understand things that have worked for me. They've worked for a number of people. And therefore, I'm sharing my point of view. We can have a healthy conversation. We can choose to agree or disagree. At the end of the day, life is about choices. We are responsible for the choices that we make, and we will live with the consequences that we make. That's it. You're mute. Deolu, you're mute. I can't hear you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Can you hear me now? Back.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So thank you very much for that. While you were speaking, somebody quickly dropped a note and said, please, the third guiding principle, no dignity in, he didn't get it.
There's no dignity quite so impressive and no independence quite so important as living within your means.
No dignity, quite impressive. Excellent. Now, I'd like to ask a few questions on a little bit on your background before we start taking the heavy lifting questions on COVID-19, life now, and how to progress going from here forward. You mentioned, there are stereotypes that exist in Nigeria. Somebody saw your picture and said that you look like Dangote.
I had this money as well.
I don't know if you have heard that before.
Not quite. The only person that they've told me that is near famous is the vice president. But
the vice president, the current vice president.
Yes, that's what they said. So I'll probably have to go and look. Maybe I'll go and tell Dangote he's my long lost brother from distant relation.
Yeah, but the funny thing with people is we form some funny stereotypes, and somehow in Nigeria, people feel the fact that you are from somewhere gives you an advantage. In your story, I have not seen that advantage. I've seen you preparing to ensure you pass tests. I've seen you ensuring that you follow certain principles. You apply for a job just once. Is there something you want to say to somebody out there who is thinking, maybe I need some connections, maybe I need a particular profile? How has it really been?
I think, first of all, when it comes to connections, so it's not to disconnections, right? Because if you have connections, somebody can open a door for you, it helps. So something as simple as if there are 20,000 applicants, how does your CV get to the front? So sometimes it can help. The key thing is to say, if my CV gets to the front, I'm called for a test, how will it work? And then I used to go around, ask. I remember the first job that I did, and I went, and I think the person was a relative, and he said, look, I can't do anything. And I remember telling him, all I'm asking for is just an opportunity to be tested. Now, when they advertised the role, I think they wanted one person, and I think there was a clear candidate from what I understood later when I joined the company from the HR people that came from one of the board members. But I think the difference between my score and the rest of the candidates was so wide. So they had to ask that they would hire two people because there was no way they could overturn that. And that's how I got it. But I think I got the lesson from my dad. I remember when I left secondary school, I grew up in the barracks. I went to a military school. Apart from JAMB, I did NDA exams. So I went with two of my friends. We went to the academy to go and check the results. Because they came with notes from generals, they were allowed to go inside and check their results. I was not allowed to, right? So I went back home. My dad was in the army. My dad was captain at that time. And I said to him, look, you're in the army and you also have friends. Of course, you also went to academy, so you must know some of the people there. And he just said a simple statement. He said, look, when I joined the army, nobody gave me a note. If you're going to join the army, you are going to join the army by yourself if that's what you want. And that thing stuck, right? So I've always been frightened of having to get a favor that if the person asks you for the price, right, it becomes difficult. One of the movies I liked growing up was The Godfather. And, he always says, something like there's something that he can do for you, I am sure we can discuss this. So you have a favor and 20 years later, you have to repay the favor. The question I always ask is, what if the price is too high for you to repay that favor? What are you going to do? So for me, I've always been conscious of that because I think that the greatest gift God gave man is the freedom of choice, and he never took that away from us. So why should I spend the whole of my life and development trying to cede back that gift to somebody else? So it's good to have mentors, it's good to have people who support you, but not to a point where you will have to pay a price because you never know. That person who made the connection for you, if it's not altruistic, then it's difficult. So even where I've helped young people grow, people who want to grow, I put them through a test, and I'm very, very clear. If somebody comes to me, I see your CV, I said, look, I'll pass you through the test. Why? Because then you don't owe me.
Yeah.
So when you pass, I say, you know what, you've earned it on your own merit. You got it on your own merit. You got the job on your merit. So I find it easy to recommend people who have the right qualifications. But I think that mindset has helped me. Now, you've got to find it, but like I said, even where you have connections, I see people join the golf clubs or some of these big clubs, they want to have connections. I say, if you have connections and you don't bring value, you will not get anything. One of the non-executive director roles that I do, I got by just meeting the chairman and owner of the company at the golf course after 30 minutes. We were playing and he said, look, I had never seen him before. He's an old man, 82 years old at that time. And he said, look, he was just talking about his business problems. And I said, look, why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? And he then asked me, are you into publishing? I said, no, I'm a business leader. I always look at different sectors. That's why I can give you my point of view. And I left. And the next day, the caddy who carried my bag called me and said, Otumba wants to have your number. And okay, have my number. He invited me to his office. He was interviewing for a marketing manager, and he asked me to observe. I just sat back, and they had a consultant. When they finished, I gave my point of view. I said, this guy I don't think is right. This guy I don't think is right. All of them, I will not take any person. But if you have to take anyone, it's this person, and this is the reason, but this is what you've got to prepare. And the next day he calls me, says, send me your house address. And I sent it to him only for me to get home, and I find a letter appointing me immediately non-exec director and all of that. So I always tell people, have something of value to offer. So even where you have the connection should open the doors for you so that your value shows. But if you focus on finding connections, right, you may be used for dirty jobs. Because, bad people always need somebody that will do the dirty job for them.
Yes, sir.
So in businesses, in organizations, I say play the politics of value, right? So the company, your organization, the people around you should know who is the person to go to if we want to know the truth. Who is the person to go to if we want somebody to think through the problem or to give us a different perspective? That's the kind of politics I recommend that people play.
Very interesting. Talking about politics, I like the way it's heading. So somebody is asking as well, somebody is thinking and saying, so you have risen through all of these ranks, manager here, country manager here, leader here, and you said no connections. So, and you said it's the policy of value. How does that work? How do you make it ahead in your career and get to the top without knowing somebody somewhere and, pandering to somebody's perspectives? What exactly is this policies of value?
Because organizations want people that will make a difference, right? Organizations want to produce results. Organizations want sustainable results. Now, not all organizations want this. Not all organizations or leaders understand how to do this. Again, like I said, I've been fortunate also to work in some of the world-class organizations where they have principles that guide them. If you think of Procter & Gamble, they've been around for more than 200 years. Guinness has been around for more than 250, 260 years. Pizza that I just left has been in Nigeria for 125 years, right? So they don't get to that level, right, without doing certain things consistently. And one of the choices, the biggest difference in any organization is the people. Because where you see values of an organization, go and check all the big companies in the world. It's just a change of words, right? The value statement, the purpose are all similar, right? Everyone says we want to serve the consumer. We want to serve our customer. We want to be the best as customer service. It's not the words, it's how you bring it to life. And the way it's brought to life is by the people that you have. Their personal values congruent with the values of the organization. If you have that, the organization tends to grow. Sometimes you'll find an aberration. You'll find, a faulty DNA where a manager rises and he doesn't have the right values of those organizations. Those organizations tend to remove those people. So you have bad leaders in some of those organizations. Now, in other companies, and typically more of the Nigerian companies, you have a poor culture. You have this SASA culture. You have a culture of mediocrity. I think people say our problem is corruption. I don't think it's corruption. Corruption is just a byproduct. It's actually a culture of mediocrity that has resulted in the corruption being seen. So you can do that. And if you recognize that, you take the power in your hands, right? You're not obliged to stay in those organizations. So if you start to do well, I can tell you, look, I know if I'm looking for a marketing manager, I know where to look for. I know the kind of people to look for. I know people I can call to say, tell me about this, that I trust their judgment to say, okay, this person can. So that's the way it works. So once people understand that you are somebody who stands for something, they will be able to recommend you. Now, it can be painful, right? Yes, it can be painful. It's not always been smooth sailing. I've had an expatriate boss who told me that he felt I would give him trouble, right? And he did everything to, frustrate my life. And I was very conscious of that fact. But I had to ask myself at a point, was I going to react like him, or was I going to choose to be me? And even in organizations where things have not been consistent with I was very clear, I will not cross this line, even if it meant that it would seem like my performance was bad. Look, I tell people you can fire me for poor performance, not a problem, but you can't fire me because you say my integrity is questionable. Neither can you fire me because you say my competence is questionable. On those two grounds, you can't fire me. You can fire me because you don't like my face. You can fire me because the results are bad. You can do a good job and you end up with bad results. You're the leader, you are accountable for the results, you carry the cross. So you've got to be comfortable that it's okay to be fired, right? And once you're not afraid of that, then you'll find out that you will release yourself. One of the big things that make people hold themselves back is fear. One of the first breaks I had in my career was actually when I was with Leventus. The white guy, he was the second in command. He used to be a bully, and I used to tell the store manager, I was a trainee sales manager, this guy is a bully, and the day he tries to talk to me rudely, I'm going to give it back to him. And he always said, look, this guy is a senior, this day he can make or mar your career. And one day he called me very rudely and I refused to answer him. So he came to me and said he wants me to do it. And I told him, sorry, I don't take orders from you. I knew he was superior to the store manager, but I said I will only take orders from the store manager. So if you want me to do anything, go and tell him. If you tell him, he was angry. The store manager came to me and said, look, Alex, I've told you this guy can make I said, Mr. Alabi, tell me, what do you want me to do? He said, this. So I went, I did it. And then I went and I tapped the guy and I called him. I said, I want to have a conversation with you. So it was strange because I think he was shocked. I was, 24 years old. I called him into the office and I told him, you've been rude to me and I do not like it. I'm a trainee sales manager and I cannot learn, right, if you put me under pressure. I expect you to treat me. But he said, no, he was not right. I said, no, you don't call me like this. My name is Alex. You want to address me, you call me like that. I said, so I just wanted you to know that I'm not a rude person by nature, but I reacted because of what you did. So he left it. And the next day, first thing in the morning, he came to me, hi, Alex, how are you? I want you to take your opinion about this. Oh, the next day, well, what do you think about this? And anything he wanted to do, he came. And before you know it, I was posted from one branch to another, posted to another. All of these things happened within 2 months, 4 months, 6 months. And then they brought me to head office to work under him directly. Awesome. So I had a promotion that people didn't get in 5 years, in 2 years.
Wow.
So it's courage to say, look, I can take it now. To be frank, did I think about it? Like I said, you know what, if this guy is going to, again, I always had this feeling, you're 24, your mates are in the university, worst thing is that he's going to sack me. But I said I was going to go to immigration, I was going to make sure that he was deported out of the country.
Okay, very good. So stand for something, okay to be fired, have courage, essentially. Yeah, very good. Okay, there are a few questions, at the backlog here. I like to take them group by group. And then if anything comes in that we need to look at from the background, we'll look at it. I think we already have a few hundreds of people already looking at us from different places. So please share on. Somebody's asking about salaries. And this is a general question. And there are various questions on salaries. And they are saying, is it all right, for companies to fire people at this time? Is it okay for companies to reduce people's salaries at this time? Is it fair? How should SMEs, behave at this time? What, cash flow, their cash flow challenges, sales is not happening, etc. What is fair to do and not to do? What are your thoughts?
I think it's a very one, right? Because I think there are a couple of things. And also, I think probably the behaviors of either the companies or the individual will probably be driven by history, right? So if you've treated your employees fairly, you're probably in a position to ask for certain things to happen. So as a principal, and I would say this is the approach we're taking in our own organization, salaries will probably the last thing to go because you have a contractual obligation, except you've looked at every other thing to say, how do we cut costs, right? To manage that for you to say, okay, this is what it is. So we did a simulation to say, assuming for the next 2-3 months, we have zero income, how are we going to survive, right? What access to facilities, loans, whatever, what will be the impact and therefore what will it be, right? So that's, as a principle, what we will prefer to do. So rather than cut salaries, I will rather streamline the organization to the right level of the organization, right? For it. And the question of whether you do it at this time or not is sometimes delicate because nobody planned for COVID. So there might have been plans to restructure the organizations before now. And the question is, do you stop what you plan to do because there's COVID, because it might seem politically unwise? Right? It seems very insensitive. My view is that you've got to do the right thing for the business. So if it's a tough bullet to bite, right, I will bite the bullet, right? But the thing is not for the sake of, okay, just a one-off, because COVID will come and go. So it's rather from a longer term decision for the business. Businesses should be able to bear the brunt for a few weeks or a few months. However, if I think of the long-term survival, COVID has raised quite a lot of questions. So people are not working. Some people have been asked to stay at home because you're non-essential. And all of a sudden you say, okay, very simply, if we are running our organization and we're able to deliver 75, 60, 50% of our revenues with only 10, 20%, it's going to raise questions about the utility of some roles. In the times when things were fat, where things were going well, people employed, right? Sometimes people employed because, okay, somebody sent a note or whatever, or somebody needs a job. Or at some point, the organization was buoyant enough to do that. I think every organization needs to periodically review and raise the standard and the bar. And what it means is that you will constantly be taking out those that are poor and average. And so the levels of standards that you set for your organizations will be different, all right? So I don't think it will only be because of COVID. I think it will be something of continuous improvement. But my view, if you have the right employees, if the employees have served you well, and you know what, you're going to go through some pain, I will not do a shortcut to say, okay, because we don't have sales for 2 months, therefore we're going to cut people. It's the easiest thing to look at, but if you look across your cost structure, you can probably find heads where there are bigger cuts that you can do. But from an organization efficiency perspective, I think every organization should use this opportunity to review their structure. What do you need? Are you carrying things that are excess? And you know what? It's going to be a frank conversation, right, with your people. However, no matter what you do, you have to do it with some level of humanity, right? So, okay, it doesn't mean the book says, okay, we give 1 month. So this is my view. I can be overruled by the board. I'm not the owner of this, but my proposal will be to say, if I have to disengage somebody, where it is not because the person has has committed a crime or anything, the person has to be treated with dignity and respect, and therefore there's a respectable package. But I don't think organizations should be blackmailed into keeping employees that are not fit for organization or that are not operating optimally because you're trying to have a humane face. You will go through ups and downs. So I think is to use this. So what we say is don't waste this tragedy. Let's not waste this that happened. You need to restructure your organization. For the employees, I think it will help you to understand in your organization what's your importance. If your organization can survive without you for 2 months, my friend, you should be querying how valuable your job is. And before they start to decide to push you, you should start looking at options. Where exactly can you go? I think sometimes in the past, some of us have made choices based on what is comfortable. We want to go to that unit where there's less work, you get your money and nobody disturbs you. This is when it's going to be obvious that that unit doesn't actually contribute so much. Yes, it might be important and maybe, but instead of 10 people, 2 people can do the job in that unit. They're going to take out 8, right?
Yeah.
So it will not happen this month, but even after the crisis is going to happen. So it's better to brace yourself and start to prepare yourself to say, okay, where exactly and how can I add value, right, within the organization? Where do I play? What happens? You know, simple tests. If I can afford to go away for 1 month, 2 months, and you know what, they don't need you, then you should be asking yourself questions.
Okay. Okay. Someone is asking, and I can see a few people have similar questions as well. So, you have risen through very structured organizations. And those organizations typically will have, standard operating procedures, best approach, and there's a structure for development. So there are two sides of the question. One side, on the side of the person building their career, how do I build my career if I'm in an organization that is not so structured? On the other side, for the company, the companies you have worked for are big companies that probably have deep pockets. For the less structured, smaller organizations whose cash flow is month on month, how will they be able to pay their salaries if they don't have revenue for 2 months? How should these ones behave? Those are the two questions.
The thing is that I think for big companies, right, it's not because they have the pockets,
okay,
right? The thing is that because of their credibility and the fact that they keep records, they will have access to funds, right? If you go and check every big company, check their balance sheet, you find out that they have loans, right? Now, one of the challenges for small companies, and this is why I always advise people when you're starting a business, always start by recording every single thing that you do. Have proper books. When you approach a bank to ask for a facility, right, the bank will always have to see history, right?
Yes,
there are times when you also borrow money, not because you really need the money, right, but because you are actually operating. You have this thing. You're building a relationship with a bank. First of all, to get a loan, right, they will go through you. They understand that. So you know that tick, you qualify. You take a small loan that you can pay off and whatever, and the impact is very low on you. But what happens is that you're building credit history. You're building a trading history with them, and then you come to say, okay, I want this loan for me to tide through this period. That's what is going to happen. Aside from that, then what you should do, I think what is fair is to negotiate with your employees. Even if you are reducing, I will call it deferred wages. So rather than an outright cut, can you negotiate with them to say, okay, you will take 20%, whatever you have is deferred. When we get back to post-COVID, we are now going to pay back an amount. So basically you're collecting a loan from your employees. I think that's a fair way to do it, and therefore it will help them. It will help them tide through the period, but they understand that they have something at stake. Also, something that I always advise people who are starting small businesses. Sometimes, you know what, just to pay salaries forever for an employee is not the best thing. Can you give them a small stake? Because if they have a small stake as your organization grows, right, they also see, because when it comes to profit sharing, they will also see the fact that they will get a benefit. So if there's skin in the game for them, right, you have the opportunity. So the organizations that will survive this crisis are the ones who have built the right framework before crisis. You don't prepare for a crisis when you are in a crisis.
Mm.
You set your foundation right and your building blocks right. So when you get into crisis, right, you will feel shocks, right? The challenge is that we are sometimes too optimistic, right? When we run business, I meet a lot of people who have business proposals, right? And they start from simple things. I use a simple, it might be a mundane example. Okay, I want to start selling shirts, right? So I have 5 friends. I come to you, I buy a shirt for 2,000, I sell it to you at 5,000. Wow, this is 100% profit margin. So I find 5 other friends, I say, wow, you know what, 10 friends, I made 100%. So guess what I do? I don't do due diligence or everything. The next thing I order 50,000 shirts because I'm thinking of 2005 multiplied by 50,000, I will hammer. All of a sudden, you find out that by the time you go beyond the cycle of your friends, now there are people who will buy, who will not pay. There are people who will say we will pay bit by bit. There are people who will return after they've used the shirt for 1 or 2 parties and tell you that it wasn't the right fit, and therefore, you know what, they have to retain it. So your business proposal or the foundation was based on a very small size that was not quantifiable. So we don't do a lot of proper due diligence, and we don't understand the steps or stages that you go through an organization for you to build results. When we start to make little bits of money, guess what we do? We start to expand. Again, it goes back to that no dignity as living within your means. So all of a sudden, you want to start buying the big cars, you want to start competing. You know, one of the absurdities I've seen is a microfinance bank where all the management staffs are driving Prados.
Wow.
You're trying to compete with Zenith Bank or with GTB. You're collecting money from people at tiny, this thing, small interest rates. You're building overheads, right? Because you want to, because there's bank attached to your name. So you're living above your means, right? So you don't prepare for a crisis during a crisis. You prepare for a crisis in the way you're set up before the crisis. What you can do now during the crisis is to reset your ways. Identify what it is, try to manage for survival, and then post the crisis, aggressively go and fix some of the things that you had fundamentally wrong.
Okay, excellent. Okay, somebody's asking this question, and I'll wave into this question and then we'll weave out into some of the business ones. The person is asking, so what you do involves, or your skill sets from the things you have done involves some level of strategy, marketing, sales, etc. It says, what will make your service, if there are a lot of people offering the same service, what will make it seem different or be at an advantage compared to other people who have similar things? So I think the question is coming from you seem to have been, getting opportunities. I am moving across the ranks. There are other people who do similar things as well. What's the advantage? What becomes the advantage? How do you convey this message to potential clients? Somebody's asking for that.
I think it's got to do with your perspective and how you look at things. So yes, people say some of this. So I have a simple approach to learning, right? And I think that if you learn by fundamental principles, you can then apply them. So I use a simple example. Yes, I have a science background, biochemistry. So if you take the law of entropy, right? Everything will go from order to disorder unless energy is applied. It's the same principle you apply in management. It's the same principle you apply in traffic management. It's the same principle if you're running a project and you have very clear task list for people and everything. What we tend to do is compartmentalize our learning, and we think that, okay, that's why when people say, oh, this person read history, how can he be working in a bank? This person read Yoruba, how can he be working in a bank? No, 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 no. What you read in a course or when you go through university, you're learning certain skills. It's skills for how to seek knowledge, how to ask the right questions, how to challenge current thinking, and how to bring your own perspective. If all you do is to bring other people's perspective, then you'll find it difficult. So most of the roles I've played, I've tended to be the person that will look at something from a different perspective. right? And look at some. I use a simple example, even though in the end we didn't execute it. You know, when I was in P&J, I went to Ilorin. We went for a market visit. The moment I got in there, we got into the market, worked with the sales team and everything. And then in the evening, I said, okay, let's go and check into the hotel now. We didn't do any pre-booking or whatever. And unfortunately, it was one of the days when the Baptist Convention had their convention in Ilorin. So anything that looked like a room in the entire Ilorin was taken over.
Wow.
And we were thinking with the team, so where are you going to stay and all of that? So I simply asked the guys, what is the best private hospital in Ilorin? And they looked at me and I was asking, why? What do you think? I said, no, if there's a best hospital, they'll have a private one. I just simply go and say, I have a headache. I want to stay for bed rest. I will pay the bill for the hospital, sleep at night. The next morning I get out and continue is it not the same thing as a hotel bill? But the guys thought I was mad. So I think so if you bring yourself, you don't have to be like anybody else. I can look at a problem from a different perspective. And I try to keep things very simple. I learned from a boss. He used to say, you know what, if you can't, I want you to explain this to me in a manner that I can explain to my grandmother. So everything I try to simplify, it's not rocket science. You know, we like speaking in big grammar. So everywhere, everybody wants to use high sounding words to show this, I know so much. No. What is the problem we are trying to solve? What is the mischief we're trying to fix? It's as simple as that. So I can show you that this is what your problem is, and this is how you can fix it in not so many words, right? Because I will not stay on the surface. So if you think through time, right, there are things that have always been required. Leadership, right? What is it all about? It's your ability to create a vision of what is possible, an ability for you to enable that to happen, an ability for you to execute it well, and an ability for you to transmit energy to other people who are doing that. You will always require that, irrespective of what function, what role. Thinking and problem solving. Do you stay on the surface, or do you actually go down to what the root cause is? You know, if you don't have character, right, you may have competence and therefore you apply the wrong judgment to certain things. So there are people who come to you with a solution because they're thinking of how much money they're going to make rather than how to solve it. You know, as a rep, I've told a customer, he made an order and I said, sorry, I won't sell this to you. He said, why? I said, because it will tie down your money. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to sell you only 2 pieces, right? I will come back next week. When you've sold it, I will sold you 4. We are going to build your business graph. If I just wanted short-term success, I would have sold him the 2 cartons he wanted, but I would hide his capital. So I don't try to do everything. I try to keep things simple and try to make things as practical as possible. I think every one of us has something different. What I always remind people is that we're over 7 billion people on Earth. And we have 7 billion different DNA structures because every person can be identified. As tiny as the fingerprint is, we have 7 billion different fingerprints, 7 billion different retinal structures. What does it tell me? God simply meant for each one of us to be different. Yes, you've got to find out who you are, bring that your difference is, but do it with skill and competence and character. If you do that, people will see the difference.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so another very interesting question. So this is also 2 parts. There's going to be a lot of thought about survival now. So there are people whose careers may not survive COVID-19, and there are people whose businesses may not survive COVID-19. So what are some survival strategies you will recommend, or what are the essential things that companies need to do at this time to stay alive? What do people who are building their careers? Access Bank just announced that they are letting go of 75%. Sterling Bank is turning people away. What's it called? Andela is taking out about 400 people. So different organizations are basically getting rid of staff. So people will need to begin to look for jobs again, will begin to define their competitive advantage. What are the survival skill sets for this time for employees, and then for companies who have not made any revenue for 1 month, whose line of business has now become a little bit challenged? So people in the airline business, people in the travel business, people in real estate with social distancing, where they come and rent spaces for weddings and those kind of things, will have hits, and many other organizations as well. What are the survivors strategies for this time? What do you recommend?
I think because in this period, I think the first thing is actually to cut down your costs as lean as possible. Take down anything that is non-essential. You know, we have this conversation with my wife on and off, and we say, you know what, the most important thing right now to us is the education of our kids. So, and during this crisis, we've seen things happen. We've seen exchange rates go up. We've seen requests from people, family who are looking for support. And we said, you know what? If anything happens, what are we going to do? So if it comes to brass tacks, what are you going to cut out? Right? So that you know that this is the number one priority. This is not the time for pride. This is not the time for status. And I think for people, this is probably the best time to understand that, okay, maybe you can change your thinking. That you don't need to have 500 people in your wedding for your wedding to be successful.
Yep.
Right? You don't need to eat 3 times a day, right? You don't need to go to that through all the same things that you used to go through to do things. You know, I'm alone here in Jos. My DSTV expired, and I said, wait a minute, there's no premiership, right? Why the heck? For it, and you know what? DSTV can go to hell for a few days or for a few weeks, right? I wasn't bothered. It didn't make. So I think it's cutting down your cost, identifying what is really, really essential for you, right? You've got to take an estimate of how long you think this thing will last. Now, we are typically very optimistic, so sometimes we tend to wish that it will wind away. It might not, right? Because if you don't do that, you're just postponing the evil day, and therefore you have cut today, you actually will. So it's better to start. You know, one of the things our group CEO said, look, better to start by assuming zero. So we ran some scenarios assuming zero. What is our cash flow? What is the end results we have at the end of the year? What are the choices that we have to make, right? And how do we drive some of those choices? You will also notice that there are some things that are happening, so certain areas that are helping. For example, here in Jos, okay, we're speaking with the members of the State Economic Advisory Committee. So you don't have things like delivery services. So there are opportunities for people to say, you know what, people are allowed to make food, but you don't have delivery services. So is that a new stream for someone to say, okay, let me look at something that I can do? So I think it's going to vary from industry. For airline, for hospitality, it's a tough call.
Yep.
Because you're flying, right? You have no revenue. You have people got to identify that, and you got, so for me, what I would say is that you either go to your people and say, you know what, this is what we will do. We will defer this kind of payments, right? And when we come back, as we start to get back to life, we will pay, we will bring back people. But you've got to identify who your core must keep is. Because you may end up, if you don't communicate early to your people, losing some of your must keep people in the mass of, okay, you're trying to cut down a number of people. So I think right now it's simply about survival, cut costs, cut to anything that is not necessary, anything that is surplus to requirement. You know your business, you know what is required. So for the individual, the same thing, right? Speak to your family. You know, again, like I said, we always speak to the kids and we say, you know what? The most important thing we're trying to do for you is to give you an education. And you shouldn't be bent on where that education is. So don't get tied up that education means either I go to a private school or I go to a foreign university. I said, no matter what happens, your education must continue. So I want you to have that at the back of your mind, so that also in the mental perspective, you know, if you're a family member, you've got to be honest. You've got to share with your family so they understand, right? Expectation is the mother of disappointment. If they have no clue, and all of a sudden you come and you start telling them stories about what to do, they're not going to see that. And if you're in a leadership position, you have to lead by example. It's got to be clear from the people what you're asking them to do, the sacrifices that you're also applying the sacrifices to yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. Very good. I have a few that I think will be rapid fire questions, so we can quickly do them in a few minutes. Someone is asking here, how do you maintain a culture of excellence when everywhere around you is, favors mediocrity? So I think it's a question of working an organization that is not so cultured or so structured. How do you make that difference?
I think that's why courage is important, because I think one of the things about courage is not absence of fear, is the fact that you're able to move on. I think for a lot of people, they are afraid of what other people will say. So you need courage to say, you know what, I want to stand out. The second thing I simply say is the standards you set for yourself. So you've got to be brutal and honest with yourself. Don't blame it on the environment, right? If I commit an offense, if I do something, I never say the environment. I say, you know what, I accept responsibility. I got it wrong because I got it wrong. I thought about it and I decided I will not use the environment as a get out of jail card. So it's tough, right? So the thing is that if you recognize that the organization is not right for you, use the period while you're there to at least get some achievements that will help you get your next role. You've also got to be deliberate about the choices of where you work. Look, I've had offers, right, that were, one of the most ridiculous was twice what I was earning before I refused to go. Because the question I always ask myself before I take any role is that, will this organization allow me, right, to live my values and principles? Now, even when you get in there, you will find even in the same organizations, it's always a battle, because there's somebody who wants to deliver results shortcut, right? So I've had instances in my career where I've had to clean legacy issues that I inherited from people, but those same organizations were world-class. But you have to make a choice to say it's about you as a person, right? So I think it's a tough one, but it's something you've got to look yourself in. I always talk about a positive confrontation and say, what exactly do you want? It's not an easy road, because what it means is that at every point in time, you will always have to be proving, working hard to do that. Now, that's why it's good to have a clear sense of purpose or statement that defines you, because that's your anchor when things are tough. The second thing is that you've got to find a group of people where you share similar values, because like iron sharpened iron, right? So people across different organizations, I have friends across different organizations that share the same values, right? So sometimes we reinforce the thoughts and beliefs, and if we face challenges, you know what, you can deal with that. And then it's just to be true to yourself and to be clear, what is it that makes you sleep well at night, right? Because rather when you're by yourself in your bathroom, because that's I think the best moment of truth and honesty, you're stripped to who you truly are, right? And if you can define that for yourself, I think it will help you. There might be some steps you have to take to help you. If you can find somebody who is a coach who can support you, not to say, if you can find colleagues who can, you can always learn from colleagues. I think sometimes the challenge for most people, they think I must learn from my line manager, right? You can learn from colleagues. You can learn from people who are junior. I've learned things from people who are junior. I'm not afraid to ask you, how do you do this, right?
Yeah.
You can also learn from observation. I can sit and watch somebody operate a machine, right? I was in a factory once, and that's what I did every day, because the guy, they felt, oh, this was the most important person in this. They say, and you know, he decided when he wanted to start the machine or not. So I took up duty every time. I never said anything. I observed. And the next time I said, guys, can you start pumping the syrup for us? And they said, this guy is not around. I said, no, sorry, I'm going to handle the machine. And when I did it, that was the last time we broke the person's back. It never helped us to ransom again. So you can learn from everybody. The key is to have a mindset of continuous improvement, right? Stop benchmarking yourself against somebody else. You look, find out who you are. Think of how can you be the best you. But just have this mindset that today I will be better than ever. What I always used to do, especially early to the middle of my career, I never measured how much money I earned or got. I simply had a simple measure. This year, what is it that I know how to do that I could not do last year? And how can I prove it? Through either task or results or things that I have delivered. What I have seen happen is that with that, it then means your earning power is increased.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, someone is asking, I think it's a quick question. What about companies, small companies that don't feel that they should collect loan? They're averse to collecting loan.
Well, if it's a choice. Look, I am not, like I said, it's not an advice, right? Every choice has to be rational. Why is it? You know what? It's like, I am dying, right? Let's assume there's something that I don't eat, right? Okay, I don't like some medicines, right? But if I'm ill, whether I like it or not, right? I will listen to the doctor because it's the best person that has the advice. I take it. I'm not sure there's anybody that loves injections, right? But we accept it because we have to. So I think we've got to get out of the phobia of loans or debt, right? I think sometimes we see it as something that is bad. No, it depends on what you do. So we say, okay, Nigeria is borrowing money. It's because there's distrust, right? If you borrow money to invest in infrastructure and things, right, that will build your future, it's a worthwhile investment. If you borrow, right, on consumption, then you know what, you're heading to destruction. In the short term, however, you need to stay alive. So sometimes you have short-term borrowing, but you have to do a forecast. How long will this last? How much are we going to do? And how do we get out of that? So once you get out of this, the lesson should be that in time of boom, how do you save money, right? Okay, once upon a time, we had reserves that went as high as 62. And like some people fortunately say, we have a former leader who kept some reserves for us.
International.
In times of boom, you save. Because there will always be times of bust. No organization ever goes through its entire life without a period where you don't have tough times. You build for the tough times in good times.
Very good. Thank you very much, sir. Someone is asking this. Is there anything you would, if you go back in your career 20 years ago, are there things you have seen that will make you go back in time and change some things? Are there things you will change? Any things you will do differently?
And there's some things I think I might do differently, because I think at different times I've tried to oscillate. You know, very early in my career, I was very, very tough when managing people, especially on performance, even though I did it with the fact that I wanted things to be done right. Okay, could I have found a balance? Because, you know, there are some people that you probably need the heart approach to get them to understand what to do. So maybe I will have tempered that differently. You know, one of the organizations I left, I probably felt I had done enough to leave a foundation, and therefore I expected they could go ahead, because I felt that, look, I never want to leave a job half done. So sometimes I feel maybe did I leave a bit too early because my job was not completed. On the other hand, I think also I've tried to adjust to say, okay, because people say you're too hard. There are times when I feel that there's some people I will have taken out. So I don't beat myself up for any things of the past. I just take the lessons and say, you constantly be trying to find the balance. You know, there's, it's trying to lead or manage with your head and your heart. You've got to have a balance of both, and we're all built differently. So sometimes when HR people say work-life balance, I tell them, no. I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe in life balance, because work is inside of life. It's just that people can feed on 21 hours of work and 3 hours of life. Some people can feed on that. What matters is the output and how it fits with your personality. So I'm constantly learning how to improve that, because I think that It's something I've not found the right balance. In terms of choices, no, because I think I've had the privilege of having learned. Each of the organizations I've been has given me something different. So what I always tell people, look at what no matter how bad the organization is, first of all, don't look at the people. The people, right, manifest the DNA of the organization. So I look at the values of the organization. So I say, in principle, this is what the organization wants to be. However, this my boss is choosing to be an aberration. So it's a malfunctioning DNA within the organization. I will not take it on the organization. I assume it is peculiar to that individual. So it helps you react. Else, you will build a victim mindset. And the challenge is that if you build a victim mindset, it will not help you improve. So I've made mistakes. I've taken risks that I think I could have been fired a number of times. I've been fortunate, maybe because of the intention or whatever, right? Okay, it was seen as, look, you were doing the right things, even though it didn't work out. So I guess that's something I will always have wanted. I will always have wanted to do.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. I saw this very interesting question. Person is asking, post-lockdown, companies are going to reorganize their workspaces and facilities to comply with physical distancing rules. What do you think should be the constitution of the team responsible for implementing this reorganization?
I think it's responsibility of the entire business, so it should be a multifunctional team. It's not. I am not one of those that believes that you leave HR to decide some of those things. You know, HR does tasks, spaces, this and that. No. And actually, I think in a lot of organizations, we've wrongly defined the role of HR, right? So because you don't have that, I will say it's a leadership responsibility. HR, I think, is responsible for for the culture and values of the organization. If you want to have a high performance organization, that's the value and culture you want to put in. Everything you put about performance management, your reward, your OD, and all of that is to drive that. Now, who has to hold the management and the people to account, right? HR has to be able to do that. When you're speaking to the people, you're speaking on behalf of the management. When you're speaking to the management, you're speaking on behalf of the people. It's a tough job. It's not an easy job. I think a lot of people are interested in the task and tick boxes. So the more question is not about social distancing, it's about the relevance of the structures and the roles you have in the organization. You will have to challenge and question every single one. Why does this role exist, right? What is the value that the role adds? And how can you enrich some roles? Because at the end of the day, people will struggle, especially some people who have been let off, because their roles have never been enriched. Now, without being, and my apologies if anybody takes this wrongly, but assuming you're a teller in the bank, you've been a teller for 5 years, you're counting money every day using a counting machine. A sales boy in the open market does that the same way every day. So what makes you think that your skills are very different from that person and why you should get something somewhere? The fact that your department title says marketing, you're a bank and you're going to look for deposit doesn't make you a marketing person. You have no clue about marketing. You're a deposit collector. We've got to be honest and brutal, right? So that's all you've been doing. You've not built any skills that are transferable to any other industry, right? So some people are going to suffer or struggle more than the others because some of the tasks they've been doing are not things, they're not skills that are sellable. Except, of course, once you were a teller, you showed some leadership, you changed the way they did things through your thinking, you did a change in design, you led, you know, those things are the things people will look at to say, oh, this person brought new solutions, this person changed the way. Now, people like that will always have something to look at. But okay, you counted money, you counted your money on time. You know what? Somebody in the open market can do that.
Okay. Okay, so I'll just like to summarize the few remaining questions. There's something that I think you should answer as well. So I'm looking at this your career trajectory, and I've seen, management, leadership. Is there at any point where this is going to enter into the national space?
Look, so after doing all of these things, right? I think for me, very simple thing is that I always want to add value. I want to make, I believe in Nigeria. I believe in the potential that the country has. I think I've been around this country. I think there's only one state capital I've never spent a night in Nigeria, and that's Yenagua, right? Wow. I have friends from across every part of this country. The poorest part of Nigeria is richer than some countries in West Africa I've been to. Wow. We have a challenge, right, of leadership to make us actualize what we have. But it's not leadership because you see people at the top. Because just as the guys at the top are messing up, you find people who are gatemen, who are policemen, who are also messing up in their places of responsibility. So there's a shared responsibility. We cannot point at the top. So I see myself contributing. I think so. So I have access to people. I can share my thoughts. I don't believe that leadership means that you must be the one there. Do I have a governance? No, right? But I will share. I will give its service. Is what I've been given. I've been privileged to have built skills. I think it will not be fair to prepare the next generation. There are kids who are coming up, who are younger, who are smarter, and there's no reason why they cannot be, and who says we cannot support them. It doesn't mean I'm close to it, but I do not have that aspiration. Personally, it's not something that I want. I always tell people I'm a reluctant leader, right? In the sense that it was not something that I aspire to. I only recognize it as a burden that comes with whatever gifts that you're giving, right? So you can't run away from it. So giving exposure, I've been given development, I've been given roles. There's certain burdens of responsibility that come from it. And I accept it. I don't see it as a burden. I accept it because it's something I find joy doing. So, but do I see myself, right? I guess I'm not well known in my state because I've not spent time here. And I'm not going to limit myself. I'm not from one state, right? I'm from Plateau. My wife is from Delta. My best man was from Anambra State. I'm godfather to somebody from Ondo State, to kids from Ekiti State. My children have cousins from Kogi, right? Because we have intermarried from Kogi, Delta, Edo, Kaduna State, and Ondo State. So I am not going to limit myself to
on local government.
I don't think that I have. If, however, the opportunity comes, I will not turn it, but it will have to be on my own, on terms or on the principles that I accept, and with people that I feel that are of like minds.
Okay. Also, as we begin to wind down today, some people believe that we will not return to business as usual. That COVID-19 has changed things not only for the short term, but there will be a new normal. Places like Lagos that normally have road congestion may need to begin to be embracing a lot more online activity and those kind of things. What's your take on this? Do you think the world has truly come to change? And are there things we need to step up to? Are there, some people are doing some businesses, do they really need to outrightly shift from their line of business? Do they need to be flexible and do other things? Do they need to embrace new opportunities? What do you think, maybe like parting shots, what do you think the world, anybody who's listening today to this today, and we have quite a number of people listening today, what do you think they can take away and say, this is what I'm going to do to prepare, to ensure that going forward, I can have a better life here?
I think change is something that has always been with us. So I don't want to say that it changes because of COVID-19, right? Okay. Change has always been with us. So certain events, right, either accelerate or make things happen, and therefore, we have to adapt. There are certain skills that people never talk about, but over time, they've always been there. One is resilience, right? because when you build yourself for resilience, it means that when tough time comes, you can handle that. We never really focus about that. And resilience is not just about how you do business, but it's also mental, right? We're going through stuff right now that mentally will challenge a lot of people, right? So how do you build that to ensure that, okay, so I think post this, people always have to think about, how do I build my business for resilience? How do I build myself for resilience? How do I build my family for resilience? The second thing that a lot of people never talk about, but is always there, is agility, right? Agility is your ability to react to change and to do it in a manner that is excellent. So how do you build a structure for your organization that is not so rigid? It's a solid foundation. However, building blocks that can be always moved around. So it's like building a house with Lego, right? You have a clear, defined this thing, and then you can always change depending on the situation or circumstances, because the fundamental principles have remained the same right from time. So what will happen is people will adjust, people will get used to it, and what we say is abnormal today will become the new normal. Now, things like technology have always been there. Some people have adopted it fast and a long time ago. They benefited. They're the ones that will have made the most out of this. So take online and take delivery services, right? During this period now, those businesses will have continued to thrive, and they'll continue to do that. Now, when I looked at the queues outside of banks, I asked questions: why are people going to banks to eat? What we say is abnormal today will become. So why are people going to banks, right? And this is when you can do your transactions online. But you know, like some people say, oh, I don't do any online transactions because again, we're scared. Yes, there are scams, right? But you know what? It's just like cars kill people. If you don't go out because cars kill people, you're going to stay indoors, right? So it's a question of balancing the risk that we face. So the change has already been there. However, the thing is that this will force us to adopt some of the things. So online definitely is going to expand. This kind of conference or seminar, maybe in the past we will have arranged it for when I was in Lagos.
Yes, sir.
50 people in a room. Right now, we're having to adjust to do this, right? To make sure that it's we're able to go through this. However, initially it will be a bit of a challenge, but we all adapt, right? Now, it's only the species or the people that are capable and willing to adapt that will survive. It's not always to the fittest, it's not always to the swiftest, it's not always to the strongest or the most intelligent. It is to those that are capable of surviving. So I think what we've got to think about is, how do you build yourself to be resilient and agile? All the other fundamental principles we've spoken about play in helping you build agility and resilience. If you build that, then what you start to find out is that, you know what, there will always be another crisis. It will not be COVID. You know, I was going through some of my old reviews. In 2016, we had this massive devaluation and everything. We've not reached that level. You know, we're talking about COVID. At a point, the pound went to 600 naira. You know, the dollar went to 500 naira. In my time, we did simulations expecting it to get to 1,000, and we had, what are the actions we will do if it ever hit 1,000? It didn't hit 1,000, it got to 500, and then it went down again. Now we're in the same cycle, and I looked at my notes from that time, and I said, what's changed? It's just the cost of the chaos this time is different. So chaos will always be brought by something different. However, the impact on us might be the same. This is different because it's a health challenge, and therefore there's a bit of scare. But what I want to leave people with, without sounding very reckless, is very simple. If we look at the facts from COVID, right, 85% of the cases worldwide have been mild cases. So it's highly contagious, but 85% have been mild cases, and therefore the chances of recovery are high. The people at risk are the aged and those with underlying conditions. We've got to find a way to make sure that those people are extra protected. We've got to protect ourselves. But, at some point, we've got to start thinking of how we're going to move ahead, because we cannot stay behind. At some point, it's got to happen, right? Whether we like it or not. So the ones who are ahead of the game are the ones who have seen that, okay, we can use technology, right? So for any business that is not leveraging on technology, you've got to think about that. For any business that does not think about its people as the most important asset, right? You've got to think about that. For any individual who does not think about developing himself as the best investment you can do for yourself, it's not that car, it's not that extra house. No, any money spent on yourself is something that will always pay out over the long term. So prepare yourself for things like this by building agility and building resilience.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much, Alex Goma. I'd like to close with this question. Somebody pushed this, and I think the person needs an answer. It says, it's obviously a very busy man. Tell us, how do you relax? How do you sharpen the saw?
Well, yes, there are a couple of things that I do. First, I've always loved football. So early on, I trained to be a football referee. I stopped at grade 2 when I was as a grade 2 referee. But after that, I continued to play. So I play Saturday football. I actually play with 2 teams in Lagos. We have an Arsenal Nigeria, and I also have a team called Bel Air United. And here in Jos, I play with a team called Pro Leisure. So that's something I do. Second thing I do is golf. I picked it up later in life. I also found out that it's one of the games that teaches you about personal development and the fact that the focus should be on yourself and your objective rather than the enemy. So it helps me. I get a lot of joy from that. I'm also learning how to play the saxophone. I hope that one day I'll be able to play in a bar without being stoned, right? I like to hang out with my friends where I can. I like to help, things like this, okay? If I can share my lessons, if I can share things that can help people, I do that to help. Just to relax, because it takes away from the pressure. I try not to take myself too serious. That's why I always refer to myself as Alex, because at the end of the day, that's what I always will be, because I'm going to leave this job. It's not a chieftaincy title, so it's not for life. And if I leave, right, if I have to go back to any of my former companies, I have to fill a form to go in there. So there's no need to carry it on your head, right? And then, of course, I like to play with, or rather I have this aspiration to be a very big grandfather or uncle, have plenty of money, spoil my grandchildren very rotten so that their parents will have wahala, right? So I enjoy when you play with kids because they're innocent, but they rejuvenate you. They give you joy. I know one of the areas where I have a big gap, my wife always says I prioritize, and if I had a second chance, probably is to thank her, because I think I have a partner that helped give me time to do the things that I do. Because if she demanded for her time, should be while I would do. So I think I have to recognize that fact, I think for those who are not married, I would advise you, one of the best life-changing things would be to find a spouse who is comparable to you. Let us make a helpmate who is comparable, not inferior, right? Not subordinate, right? Comparable to you, because your wife can hold you to account. You people call me all names. Oh, Alex is a superstar, is this and that. My wife, so when she calls Alexander, I know there's a problem. Because, but so I think if there's one thing I could have found the right balance for me is to say, okay, how could I have given her all the time and still able? So I think I'm grateful that I have someone that has supported me. We've supported each other, but I think it makes it easier. So even when I'm not working. And after playing football, we sit down to drink beer with the guys, and I come back later than I planned to come. Uh, there's a bit of understanding that has helped. So that's typically what I do to relax.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alex Goma. It's been very refreshing talking to you today. I'm sure many people here have learned in various ways. Um, so I think I'd like to, just gradually wind it down. There are a few questions that I think are not very big questions. Things like, how do you get by in places where they say you don't have job experience? I think go and build experience somewhere else, and then you have experience. I think anything we allow to be our excuse, we've just allowed it. We can take responsibility directly ourselves and tell ourselves, I will have no excuse. I will achieve all I want to achieve. Make up your mind and then go for it. I think it's been very enriching tonight. I think there's so many lessons from this. This discussion is going to be made available online to be shared within the communities. So if you are here today and you're not in any of the communities, please ask the person that invited you to show you the way there. The link to the YouTube video will be there. It's currently going on Facebook. There are a few comments coming from there as well, asking, can they ask their own questions and the rest of them. Whatever we have not answered, I'll try and curate and send to you. There were a few questions that I thought were too specific, of people looking for solutions to particular problems that may require a lot more time. So, and I think that may be the basis for a more extensive masterclass. If you're in that category, please hit me. We'll try and see if we can get a protected time where your issue can be looked at, and Mr. Alex can find what he can do to help in some of those things. I think with over 20 years of marketing, distribution, supply chain, planning, strategy experience, there's a lot of value that is being blessed with, and I'm sure you'd like to share. Some of those meetings we may make sure that it's not free, so that sometimes we value things when they're not when we've paid for them. But we'll plan and see how we can progress with that. I'd like to say thank you very, very much for making today. I think it was much more than worth it. I don't know if anybody wants to, any comments tonight. Just put your comments there as we gradually begin to wind down. I didn't know you were in Jos, so it's amazing that we can do this meeting from Jos. Excellent.
Yeah, I usually operate between Jos and Lagos. We have offices and we have factories in other locations, but I happen to have been here at the time the lockdown happened. So I've been traveling for the past couple, and I also felt that it was not right to stay back in Lagos whilst the team was dealing with the issues here. Sometimes it's good to lead from the front. So the good thing is that all my entire leadership team, though their families are in other locations, are actually based there. So basically, we've kept the factory running. We've asked people who were not criticals to stay away from the office, but at least sometimes just to show, walk into the factory, show the guys that also you're part of, you support what they're doing, and you can see what they're trying to put to happen. I think it's something that's useful.
Awesome. Well done, sir. Well done.